So if any questions come up while I'm talking, I actually have, it's kind of like a fundraising drive, except it's employees of mine at Best Buy that are waiting for your tweets. So just definitely # BBY Open if you have any live questions that you want to ask during the presentation. There we go. Greg Louganis, 1988, Seoul, Korea, the Olympics. Who remembers Greg Louganis hitting his head on the diving board? How crazy was that? 20 minutes later, he was back up there, did pretty much the same dive, and to the awe of the crowd, nailed it, won the gold medal. Now, this might be a shock to you all. I'm not a diver. So I don't really have a lot in common with Greg Louganis, but the reason I thought this was kind of a cool story was when they asked him, why were you able to do that? He said, it was belief. It was belief in my coaches, belief in my training, belief in the people who supported me. One of the biggest things about building an API business is belief. You have to have a conviction. It's more than just saying, we're going to build a technology. It's about understanding that this can change your business and how you do things. It's not a new way of doing business. It's the way of doing business in a lot of industries. So I've been at Best Buy for 3 years. About 5 years ago, people at Best Buy were trying to figure out what's the next thing? Where do we need our data? How do we integrate? Should we be on MySpace? What's this, the Facebook thing, or Yahoo or Google? And what they realized was there was other folks in other industries that were leveraging APIs. And they realized, you know what, we're going to get out of the business of trying to predict the future. Why not build a platform that our mobile apps can use, that our internal apps can use, but also now it provides that kind of data for partners in the market to make a determination. Well, that was 5 years ago. APIs aren't some new, funky technology. APIs in lots of industries are table stakes. It's the thing to do. So a lot of you have probably seen this statistic where there's going to be, the prediction is 7 internet-connected devices per person, over 1 trillion devices. That's too much. You cannot predict the industry. And you probably saw this from John earlier, but 7,000 plus APIs, you can see the growth pattern. It's table stakes. This should not be your future, this should be your yesterday. So you really need to get there as soon as possible. So how do you do it? Henry Ford said, you can't build a reputation on what you are going to do. Now, people have a grand idea of all these great things that APIs can do for them, but that's great. But what you need to do is if you're going to move forward, you need to take bites of the apple. It's great to have a long-term vision. It's great to see where things can go, but try to think in terms of near-term wins, taking bites of that apple. So how do you do it? You MacGyver it, right? So at Best Buy, what they did actually was they went out and they grabbed files of product data that were getting sent to CNET, and they grabbed batch files of store data and information, and they begged, borrowed, and stole for money within the organization to fund it. They went out on Rackspace and set this up, and they got something working. Investing in experts is key. We were working with Mastery, we were working with Rackspace, we were working with Pivotal Labs to help to the original development. Since then, we've worked with Lucid Imagination on our Solar work. It's worth the investment to get people who know their stuff, even if it's for a week, to come in and look at what you're doing and make recommendations. Next thing is monetize it. You've got something there, monetize it. So a lot of you, I come from retail, so it's easy for me to talk about, well, we can get incremental sales, we can do whatever. Other industries, it might be a little harder. But then if you're not sure how to monetize it, go back to the last slide, which is then experts. Find experts that are going to help you monetize it. You need to figure out ways, whether it's through efficiency or through actual incremental revenues for your company. What is that near-term win where you can start generating real revenues? At Best Buy, we realized until we have a commerce API, a true commerce API, because basically what we were doing was more of like an affiliate model. And so until we had a true commerce API, we could not really blow up this business in a good way. So we focused on building that out, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You hear a lot about the long-tail developers. I love the long-tail developers. We spent a year trying to chase down long-tail developers, going to South by Southwest Interactive, promoting, doing different things. Where we settled is long-tail developers are called long-tail developers for a reason. It takes a while. It's unpredictable. So if you're trying to accelerate your business, you should definitely build for them. You should embrace them through good documentation, information, support. But what I recommend, and how we did it, is find a really good partner. Whether you're Batman and the partner's Robin or vice versa, or you need to tell them that they're Batman, it doesn't matter. Find a really good partner. At Best Buy, we partnered with a company called Bridges Solutions. It's a white label loyalty marketing provider. They provide, so if you have Citibank rewards points, if you have Chase rewards points, that's all based on their platform. And so we handle the fulfillment. So if you have a Citi card and you have points and you go to their website or their mobile app and you're buying an iPad with your points, you're actually buying that from Best Buy, and that's our APIs that are powering that. If you have you have something built, you have a business case, you've got a partner, the next best friend for you is going to be some executive cover. Oftentimes, people have probably had, you don't have to show hands if you don't want to, you can if you want, but how many people are in organizations that as an API, as a platform, you have so many dependencies on other applications, other teams, and trying to get that buy-in and trying to get that support from other groups and explain it to them is a very difficult thing to do. It's not hard to explain what you're doing, and it's not hard to even get them to think it's great or cool, but to get their permission or to get on their roadmaps can be a challenge. So we specifically were very fortunate. We had certain executives that were in our corner. So when we were working with different groups to get what we needed and to move things forward, those executives, we could always use their name. And we could always escalate it if we needed to. So I cannot do a Tony Montana accent to save my life. And if you can, we'll have a little competition for a Best Buy gift card after this, and we'll check it out. Sometimes you got to kind of play the bad guy. People aren't used to change. I talked about earlier, this is more than just a technology. You're helping to change how a business works. And a lot of people are resistant to change. So you might feel like the bad guy, but in reality, it gets back to what I said up front. It's about belief and conviction and understanding how you can change things within a company. So for us, we actually up front had some challenges, but we eventually won multiple awards from Best Buy, from the chairman, from the executives for kind of challenging the norm and pushing the envelope. I love this quote. It's from The Sun Also Rises. Michael Campbell's asked, "How did you go bankrupt?" And he said, "Gradually, then suddenly." What does this have to do with APIs? So if you reverse that and you put it in a good light, APIs kind of work that way. It starts gradually, right? You MacGyver it and you get it together, and you have to get your business plan, and you get your partners, and you get your executives, and then you build this thing out. And then it's like it's there, and then all of a sudden it's working. You're making money, and people notice this. Now everyone wants to use it. It's gradual, then sudden. So what we did then to accelerate the business is we actually built a business development team. Some places call it more developer outreach or whatever, but we actually have a team that goes out, like in the loyalty space, for example. Instead of just working with Bridges Solutions, we look at other loyalty folks we can work with. We're looking at other markets where we're being specific to find partners. 3 years ago, when I started, we were the first group. We were transitioning off of Pivotal. I was hiring software engineers, and we definitely were an agile environment. We were like a startup within Best Buy, which was kind of fun. So we had the open area and the card tables. I mean, we're in the Bay Area. Everyone around here is like big deal. But when you're in a company that is kind of old school, everyone's like, what are they doing, right? 3 years later, if you walk around within Best Buy in the technology areas, you'd be hard-pressed to see very many cubes. It's open areas, it's whiteboards, it's Post-its, there's definitely been a culture change, and it helps when you have a group that's been there, done it, been performant, and people see it and they want to emulate that. So nerd alert time. Heimdall, does anybody recognize him? If you've seen the movie Thor, he's like the guardian of standing between Earth and the worlds of the gods. One of the keys is if you build this thing out and it's awesome, and you've got, the executive support and everyone's buying into it, the problem is if you don't have the proper support for your development community, you're going to run into problems. I mean, last night I was talking about APIs to some folks because that's what I do. So I'm the life of the party. I'll come start doing my API talk for people. But think about when people go to a restaurant, if you go in there and the service is bad or the food is bad or the ambiance is bad, odds are they're not going to say anything. They just won't go back to that restaurant. It's not that much different in the API world. Developers are going to invest their time to come to your API, and they're going to want documentation. They're going to want code samples. They're going to want consistent data. They're going to want things to work the way they should work. And if they don't, then they want to at least have that interpersonal connection to be able to resolve that or handle it. So a big part of your plan is once you get this rolling is to make sure that you take care of those steps and you're the advocate for the developer. So in closing, if you really believe this and you really understand that this is a new way of doing business, I feel confident that following these steps is going to enable you to take the gold home for your business. So thank you. All right.
So my big question here is how? How did you do this all? And let's start with, you said that fundamentally you're kind of changing how business works. Mm-hmm. So specific to Best Buy, how is it changing how Best Buy works?
So I think a good example would be in-store pickup capabilities. Citibank created an app with Bridges Solutions where you can walk into a Best Buy store and scan an item, and it will tell you how many points it is, and you can actually buy it right there in the store. And so the stores have to kind of change their mentality where points are tender. How do we, roll with that? Another example would be eBay. So eBay owns Red Laser, and we've recently launched the capability of that if you're at a Target store, for example, and you scan an item, and let's say Best Buy has it, there's actually a button to buy now, and then you can go to your local Best Buy and pick it up, and it'll be ready for you. So the stores have had to get used to that kind of, impact and those kind of sales, et cetera, and it's been great.
What do you mean get used to, in the sense that a store clerk has to be able to know what?
Yes.
Their job description.
Right, so somebody buys something on their phone from a different application, they need to understand, oh, this is a good thing. This is another way for us to sell stuff. So that's right. And they've been great about that.
But internally, that's kind of what you alluded to also, which is that when you're dealing with APIs, and in this case, kind of distribution models, you're touching on different parts of the company that you're not directly responsible for.
Right.
And that becomes like an internal sell issue.
Yes.
And you sort of said it was a challenge, but then you went on to becoming sort of company hero. My word, not yours. Yeah. How did you do that? I mean, how did you navigate that?
So I think that having the executive cover, proving out what we said we were going to do. That's why I was really big in talking to bites of the apple. What are those near-term small wins? And people see the behavior. They see, wow, they do things rapidly. The stuff works. It's helping the business with incremental revenues. And people just see how we do stuff. And I think that people are like, we want to do that. We see that. We're understanding that now, and so it's just learning, and it's doing what you say you're going to do.
Has it pretty dramatically expanded your notion at Best Buy of your possible selling models?
So I have to be careful what I can talk about as far as our selling models. But yeah, people are obviously embracing new technologies. They kind of see what we're doing via the API, which I can address. I think when you look at the things that eBay and Citi have done, if you look at some of the apps that are being built off our API, there are those partnership selling models. I can't really dive into the things we're doing internally, though.
But you're not stuck in a store. You're not stuck in that model.
Right.
Or just a single online presence, right?
Yeah.
There's certainly an understanding that it's much broader than
Philosophically, it's learn, shop, buy anywhere, right? It's taking the best of Best Buy to wherever the customer is at, and that's kind of our philosophy.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. That's a big change. I mean, versus thinking like we have the customer in our store, that's what we're going to focus on. We have this captive audience versus the audience is potentially anywhere we have to go find them.
Right.
You mentioned getting buy-in from the top as being key, because then you could go around and if there was any resistance, say, well, he's on board, she's on board. How did you do that?
So that was something where we had Michelle Lazar, who spoke here a few years ago, actually. She was very good at presenting our case. I think if you're trying to deal with one or two specific people, and you can, like I mentioned, monetize it, we've got a real business case here, and we have a real potential partner, and we have a near-term win that we can do. Here's a long-term vision. We're not asking you to buy into that, but here's a near-term win. If we can even get it funded by working with other teams, will you support us and will you back it? And so that's how that came to fruition.
And those were simply conversations?
Yes.
And then you could use those elsewhere. And how many buy-ins did you have?
So we had like 2 executives specifically that were supporting us, and they helped us with some money up front. And then we worked with other groups, just even things like our mobile app development. The API was kind of key in that, so we could leverage that development funding. But we had to be like a startup. Our VCs basically were other departments within the company to get the support we needed to get this rolling. So.
Right. You talked about developers and interesting developers, and this sort of seems obvious point. You have to have a decent API because they won't come back next time.
Yeah.
How did you guys test for that? How did you kind of measure your success on that front?
So it was a multi-pronged approach, I guess. So the partnerships helped because we're dealing with developers that are using our APIs. We're getting feedback. We have a feedback loop with them. We are very engaged with our developer community. So people that are using it, they don't just post in a forum. We get emails. We answer emails. We are very supportive, and we listen to the community. We also actually hired a couple of development shops to build kind of fun, cool apps to run off just for their own purpose and to learn from it, to run off of the APIs, and we also got feedback from that. So.
Oh, interesting. So yeah, it was definitely a multi-pronged approach. It wasn't just put it out there and see if they stick around model. What were kind of some pitfalls here? You make it sound too easy.
It was definitely not easy. That's why I had the Tony Montana slide. I mean, sometimes, there's going to be in any organization cultural challenges. Even if people get what you're doing, they might not always agree to it. But that's why you need to have that executive backing. That's why you need to have a really firm belief, because you're going to get resistance, and you need to have that escalation point to help you get through some of that. One thing I've learned, though, is just if you can get far enough ahead of it, where you're not just like, hey, I need this tomorrow, and they need to scramble, where you know that they're doing their roadmap planning for X amount of time. If you can get in early on that and negotiate that and help them understand what you're doing, maybe even help them fund it within their group, those are tricks you can do to get some interest from them and to help drive that.
Any other things you'd put in the pitfalls category, or kind of roadblocks along the way? Because this was a pretty long journey for you guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was gradual and sudden, yes.
Yeah.
Because it was one of the pitfalls, like I addressed, was just I think it's awesome to do developer outreach, but you need to at least in parallel try to find specific partners that are going to complement what you're doing. And that, I think we spent a year or so focused on trying to find the lottery ticket developers that we ended up spinning our wheels a little bit. And so we had to shift gears and say, all right, let's relook at this, and maybe there's one or two specific partners we can get in here that we can have that feedback loop with and have a real solid business case that we can count on.
does that require more of an investment on your part and therefore kind of more internal buy-in?
What do you mean by more of
Well,
an
if you're
investment
saying
on our
like, hey,
part?
we need to be strategic about reaching developers, and potentially, you mentioned having apps developed on the APIs in order to get feedback.
Right.
Did that essentially create another hurdle in the sense that then you needed, more budget for the project?
As far as like a budget perspective, I think early on we basically had to do the pass the hat thing, and then once we had a proven model, we could get the budget. But it all boils. You're going to get budget if you have a smart business case and you can have a near-term win. And at least in a lot of organizations, if they feel that you really are going to give them return in the near term, and it's something that is going to help advance the business, I wouldn't call it a hurdle per se. Yes, it's not a bump in the road, it's the road. So, yeah.
How big of a deal is this to Best Buy's overall business? Today and in the future, where do you see it going?
As far as how big I can't speak for our leadership other than, they give us a chairman's award, they gave us a global growth award, so it's on their radar, and so, that's about all I can speak to as far as where they're at with that. So.
But do you feel like in the future that APIs, generally speaking, are going to play a big part in how business gets done at Best Buy?
Yes, I think it already is. As far as when we say big part, you're talking about a $50 billion company, so we have a ways to go before we're having a major impact. But I do think for any retailer and most industries in general, APIs are the way of doing business. And you don't want to bottleneck yourself just on what your ideas are and what you can do. But I see other retailers like Walmart and Sears and REI, et cetera, that are also doing this. And and even Target just released some beta APIs, and it's now the table stakes for doing business.
So it's just a given, you got to be in the game.
Yes.
Interesting. That's certainly different from 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thanks very much,
Great.
Jeff.